Hello and welcome to this second video in a series of videos walking you through the process of preparing for and indeed writing your spoken language component piece for English language GCSE. Now, in the previous video, I looked at research and coming up with a particular topic that was of interest to you. In this video, we're looking now at turning that topic and that research into a plan, how to organize and structure your speech, which obviously is going to be intimately linked with the planning process, and also some important things to remember when writing the speech too. So, the first thing to remember is that a really good speech, a fantastic speech, and we're all capable of producing fantastic speeches, we need to make sure it's not just a list of ideas, okay? We want to make sure we plan very carefully because by planning, and it's something that we've experienced in our literature essay writing as well, by planning carefully, we make our arguments clear to the reader, or in this case, the arguments clear to the listener, to the audience. We make them engaging because we can think about how we shape them, but we also make them convincing, as in gathering together all of these pieces of research in such a way as to convince the listener, the audience of what we're saying. The key to this, as it says at the bottom there, is we're taking the audience on a kind of rhetorical journey. We're taking them with us through the stages of our argument, ultimately to the point, ideally, where they arrive at the end, where they listen to our conclusion and they think, yes, I agree. My mind perhaps even has been changed, or I've never thought about the topic in this particular way, and so I've learned something, and maybe my opinion, my view on the topic has now changed. That's going to be a measure of our success in terms of our speeches. So if we're going to be moving overall from the researching process to directly planning, we want to be asking ourselves a series of different questions. One of them is, what is the main message that we want to be loud and clear for our audience? What do we want to leave them with as a crucial message? And the more succinct, concise, short, to the point that message can be, the better. Once you've got that in mind, so for example, my speech is, I want you to ditch your smartphone, get a dumb phone, as they're sometimes known. That's pretty straightforward. Get rid of your smartphone, get a dumb phone. Okay, that's what I want them to be left with as my main message, because it'll make your life better in all sorts of ways. Okay, so what points then are going to support that message? Well, one of the things I need to clearly be doing is making a whole series of points about the damage that potentially smartphones are causing, seem to have been causing, really since they became ubiquitous as devices in 2012, 2013. And then within that, what evidence can I find? And this is where the researching part of the process has been so important. What evidence have I got that I've gathered together that's going to strengthen each of the points? So I need to show really that smartphones are a distraction, that smartphones are potentially rewiring our brains, that smartphones are having an impact on our concentration, that smartphones are facilitating like bullying and access to obscene material, which is having really damaging, really detrimental effects on young people. And I've got loads of evidence about that. In fact, there's lots and lots of evidence increasingly among children of your age that actually they're kind of sick of smartphones and they sort of recognize that it's poisoning their lives. They still keep drinking the poison because it's so addictive, but they recognize that it's not really a positive aspect of their day-to-day lives. So there's loads and loads of evidence, and I can then think, well, okay, I've got these key points I want to make. My overall end point is get rid of your smartphone, get a dumb phone. These are the points along the way that I'm going to kind of lead them through this journey of my argument. And then for each of these key moments on that journey, I need associated facts, statistics, and evidence to reinforce the validity of my arguments. Okay, we move on. Now, because of the variety of speeches that you can be producing, because the topics are going to be so varied, it's very difficult to give you an extremely rigid speech structure. Now, some people will be talking about their hobbies, why you should consider taking up gymnastics or something, I don't know, whatever it might be. That's very different to someone delivering a speech about abortion rights or, my kind of speech, okay, about smartphones and dumb phones. Broadly speaking, though, this is the generic structure that you want. So you want an introduction. Now, within that, one of the parts of the introduction will need to obviously acknowledge, thank you for giving me the opportunity. I'm looking forward to speaking to you today about something I feel very passionate about. That's going to be important. But what we also want is, and I'll talk about this more in a moment, we want a hook, okay? We don't want to just stand up there and go, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I think smartphones are really bad for our mental well-being and they're a distraction. You should get rid of your smartphone. And so my speech is going to try to persuade you of that. It's not very engaging, is it? So what we want is a hook. We want an interesting statistic, a shocking statistic, or an interesting fact, or something surprising, maybe like a little story, an anecdote related to your topic that is going to get their attention, going to get the audience's attention. Okay, and I'll show you an example of that in a couple of slides' time. But once we've introduced the topic, once we've hooked our audience and we've said, right, we're going to be talking, I'm going to be persuading you today to ditch your smartphone. That might seem a million miles away from what you want to be doing, but by the end of today's speech, I'm certain I will have convinced you that actually you should be getting rid of that smartphone in your pocket and you should opt for something like a dumb phone. Fine. Then I want really 3 points, 3 arguments with, as I've said here, supporting evidence as to why the person should be doing the thing that I'm suggesting they should do. Okay? That support my overall objective rhetorically persuasively, which is, of course, in my case, ditch your smartphone. So I've got 3 arguments. I'll show you an example sort of full plan that I've completed and also some example paragraphs too. Once I've done that, and 3 is more than enough for the duration of speech that we need to be producing, we're talking about 5 minutes, maybe 7 minutes tops, and then a conclusion. And again, the conclusion is not, in conclusion, I really think you should get rid of your smartphone. No, it's boring. So your conclusion is sometimes known as a call to action. What do you want them to do? What do you want them to be sort of left with as a core message? Okay, so what do I want them? Their final message clearly is get rid of the smartphone in your pocket. You'll be a happier, healthier human being for doing that. Okay? So that's the lasting message. What is the last thing you want to say to the audience that really is going to stick in their mind more than the rest of the speech, which they've listened to? Hopefully they've absorbed most of it, all of it, but really it's what you say right at the end that is going to stick, okay? Because that's the last thing that you just said to them. Okay, so move on. The introduction. We want a hook. We want a question, so a rhetorical question, a statistic, some kind of bold, controversial statement. Obviously, you've got to introduce your topic, whatever that topic might be, why it should matter to your audience, why it's important, and something of a preview of what you're going to actually be covering. There's a series of example hooks there. Okay, so a shocking fact or statistic, a rhetorical question, potentially that's going to challenge or get them really thinking as an audience, a quotation from someone who's associated with your speech topic, maybe that's interesting or thought-provoking. Here's mine. Okay, so let me sit down, bring myself a bit closer to the screen. So I was thinking about why should we get rid of smartphones, okay? What's going on? What do I know about some of the sort of philosophy, really, of how we interact with reality? And then it got me thinking about Jean Baudrillard, someone that I'd studied and read at university, and some of his ideas about our interaction with reality or indeed with images in the 20th century. And I thought, that's kind of what smartphones do. It's interesting, it's thought-provoking, and I think it will get people's attention. But on its own, maybe it's not enough because I'm going to be talking to students. They're probably not going to know Jean Baudrillard is. So on top of that, I'm going to have to include some quite shocking facts and statistics. And these are statistics that were taken from a 2024 report given to a committee in the House of Commons, so a committee of MPs. Okay, so it's like this. This is my introduction, and I'm going to read it broadly how I would actually try to deliver it to an actual live audience. So, something like this. The French philosopher Jean Baudrillard argued that we are living in an age of simulacra, a time when reality has been replaced by its representations. We no longer seek genuine experiences. Instead, we seek images of experiences. We no longer live life. We perform it. We stage it. We post it. Smartphones have become the perfect tool for this. Through them, we curate a version of ourselves, edited, filtered, and packaged for approval. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the screen replaces the street, the selfie replaces the moment, and likes replace real connection. And the impact is profound. By the time they reach 13 years old, nearly 80% of children have already been exposed to violent pornography online. 1 in 4 young people, 25% of young people, now show signs of smartphone addiction. In just 2 years, children's screen time has risen by over 50%. The real tragedy? We are no longer living real lives. We are living simulacra, scrolling endlessly through hollow versions of reality, mistaking the image for the experience. So that's my hook. That's how I would deliver it, something like that. That's the introduction to my speech. I want to get their attention, get them really thinking, am I really living my life? Or is my smartphone, which should be making life easier, almost a kind of barrier, something getting in the way of actually experiencing more of direct reality? I think it probably is doing something like that. Right. Okay. Now, once I've done my introduction, that's just the hook. And then I'll have to go, right, I'm studying here today, blah, blah, blah. Now I've got my main body of my speech. And so for each point, for each of those, in effect, 3 paragraphs, I want a very clear focused statement. I want evidence, so research, stats, different examples. And I need to make it really clear, my explanation needs to be really clear, how it connects to my overall argument. We can use things like discourse markers, like the examples below, to help us. And it might look something like this. Let's begin with something we all feel, but that we rarely admit. The constant tug of our phones pulling us away from the present moment. Hilda Burke, who is a psychotherapist and author of the Phone Addiction Workbook, explains in that the heavy device usage that plagues our lives is very closely linked to poor concentration, but also an inability to truly switch off and relax. Many people, she says, experience a constant drip feed of notifications, messages, emails, all of which create that false sense of urgency, the feeling, I must respond now. And so, as a result, we feel compelled to check our phones first thing in the morning and last thing at night, stealing our ability to focus all the way through the day. But it's far worse than just some minor inconvenience. Studies show that every time you just notice a notification, it can take up to 20 minutes to refocus on what you were doing before. Imagine the cumulative effect of that. Hours and hours of lost focus every single day. By choosing to swap a smartphone for a basic dumb phone, you can break this cycle of endless distraction. You can reclaim the ability to concentrate, to give your full attention to your work, to your conversations, to your real life, to your family, to your friends. Since swapping to my dumb flip phone, I have felt, and I can continue to feel, my concentration returning, slowly but surely. Now, the challenge of reading a longer article or a big novel, something like that, doesn't feel quite so insurmountable. In a sense, I've rescued my brain from the clutches of endless scrolling and those notifications screaming for my attention. But more than that, I've rediscovered the ability to just be, to just exist, to experience the here and now of my life in the moment. I feel like I'm more present. and I'm more aware of the world around me, no longer distracted from life itself. So there you go, something like that, okay? That's one of my arguments. That's, again, kind of how I would deliver it. I'd need to practice it, make sure it's really clear. Obviously, there's a bit of reading off the screen here, which is not great. If I was doing this for real, I'd want to boil this down to cue cards, learn it off by heart, and then just have the cue cards as a little kind of sort of aid to memory, so that I can deliver this mostly without notes, because that's always much more effective and much more engaging for an audience, because it's going to mean I can maintain lots of eye contact. Okay, there's an example. It's not perfect, but that's just an example. And then our conclusion. This is, again, what we want to sort of leave our audience with, leave our listeners with a key message in their mind. So we need to restate that main message. We've established that in the introduction. We've explored that, taken our audience on a journey through the body of our speech. And then in our conclusion, that's what we're leaving them with. So we're going to be summarizing those key points, that core argument, and then ending with a final line, whether it's a challenge, whether it's some call to action, as in this is what I want you to do, or some sort of thought-provoking quotation. Maybe even the quotation repeated from the actual opening, if that's how you start it. Now, here's an example, okay? And I would deliver it something like this. Today, I've shown you just a fraction of the damage our smartphones are doing. The constant distractions that erode our concentration, the harm to our mental health, and the way our devices quietly replace real experiences with digital imitations. Baudrillard warned us that one day we might mistake the representation for reality. And with every scroll, every like, every carefully curated and edited post, we are stepping further into that hollow world. But it doesn't have to be this way. Choosing to step back, to ditch your smartphone, might seem radical, but it's a small act of rebellion for a far greater reward. Sharper focus, deeper relationships, and a life lived in reality, not its imitation. Imagine a life where you're fully present, mindful, and truly connected to others, not through a screen, but through experience itself. So, I'm stood here today to challenge you. I want you to reconsider your relationship with your phone. Ask yourself this: are you living your life? Or are you merely scrolling through a simulation of it? Maybe it's time to unplug, step out of the simulacrum, and return to what's real. Okay, that's my ending. I've given them a little bit of an overview. You'll see in that first paragraph of my conclusion that I've just kind of listed quickly what my core arguments are. So, constant distractions, eroding our concentration, harm to our mental health, replacing real experiences with digital imitations. Those are the kind of three main points that I would be making in my speech plan. I've gone back to the Baudrillard reference, which is in my opening hook. And I've also said it doesn't need to be like this. Ditch the smartphone. This is what I want you to do. And I've said, ask yourself that question. Are you really living your life, or are you just scrolling through some kind of simulation of it? A kind of empty, hollow representation of life rather than life itself. Okay. So here is my example plan. And you can see I've worked through this to take them on that journey. You can see I've actually mentioned those three things in my conclusion. So I've gone through the intro, and then you can see point one, distractions and lost concentration. And there's a range of different quotations that I can talk about there. Social media and mental health. And I've got some interesting points from Royal Public Health Society survey. And then finally, reconnecting with real life. And I've actually got a bit of an anecdote there from Silicon Valley executives. Those are people high up within, Meta, the company that owns Instagram and Facebook, people high up at Google and so on, who basically say, I wouldn't let my kids anywhere near social media. I wouldn't let my kids even have a smartphone. There's senior people at Apple saying they won't give their children iPhones, for example, and people at Google saying they wouldn't give their kids an Android phone until they're much older. You know, if they don't want their kids to have a phone, what do they know that we don't know? Okay, by the age of about 12, almost every single child in this country has a smartphone of some description. Okay, why are people who work at these companies not letting their kids have smartphones? It's an important question. Okay, and then this is the last thing that I want to mention. Now, when I was doing those readings, I did a bit of practice before I started this video. But again, even thinking back, and if I were to watch this video back, I'd think, oh, maybe I'd tweak the way I said that there. Maybe I wasn't really happy with the way that I put that particular point, whatever. You know, when we are reading things aloud, it makes our own writing slightly sort of strange to us. And what I mean by that is when we read work in our heads, because we've already got that idea in our mind of sort of what we want to say, our brains can do a very strange little autocorrect thing where we might read it in our minds and we sort of read what we want or we imagine we've said rather than when we read it aloud, because then when we say it out loud, we can hear what we're actually saying. It makes it it separates us from our own work and we can hear mistakes. And we notice things like awkward sentences or turns of phrase where you think, that's not quite right, or I don't want to put it like that. It sounds a bit clunky or doesn't sound very effective. Is there a better way I could articulate it? So whenever I'm writing anything, and this is with emails, if I know it's an important email going out, or I'm sending a message home to parents and carers via class charts, I'll read it out loud to myself, not to someone else. I'll be sat in my room in A14 saying it out loud to myself. I do the same with all of the podcast scripts as well. You've got to read it out loud. Otherwise, if you just read it silently in your head, your speech, you're going to make mistakes and you're not going to pick up on those mistakes and correct them. So it's a really, really key tip. It's a dead straightforward thing. Anything that we write, we have to read it out loud to ourselves. Even if it might make us seem slightly strange or odd, it's good practice for your speech. Get used to actually saying those words aloud, but also you pick up on little errors much more effectively than just reading them in your own head silently. Okay, so those three things: you hear mistakes, you notice those awkward sentences, and it forces you to slow down, because obviously saying it out loud is slower than just reading it in your mind. So there we go. I hope that was a useful video covering not just the planning process, but also what the introduction with a hook might look like, what a general paragraph, point, argument, paragraph might look like, and also your conclusion, what that might look like too. So I hope that was really helpful. If there's the need for another video, then maybe I'll do another one, but certainly over this video and the preceding video, that should give you a lot of guidance and support to enable you to be really successful in both putting your speech together and also delivering it in front of your class. Okay, so best of luck with your speeches, and I look forward to hearing lots of different ones. Come and talk to me if you see me in the refectory or around school. Come and talk to me about your speeches, because I love to hear what you're doing. You always come up with interesting topics, and often, and I'm sure this is true of my colleagues as well, the other English teachers, you often teach us things about the world that we as teachers don't know. So it's a really nice kind of, I suppose, reversal of the teacher-student dynamic too. All right, so good luck, and I'll see you around school.